I have this really weird dream that I've always had since a very young age. Is one day I'm gonna see a product on the shelf, and I've always had this dream that I'm gonna watch somebody pick it up from a Waitrose shelf or like from any supermarket shelf and put in their basket. And for me, that was like success, and I'm ready to retire. Like.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're sitting with Nikita Dawda. She is the co-founder of Omega Pressery, a UK-based food brand producing premium cold-pressed avocado and macadamia oils. She launched the company with her husband, Niki, in May 2024, with a mission to rethink everyday cooking oils, creating products that are better for our health, better for the planet, and better for the farmers who grow the ingredients. So the products are now stocked, I believe, in Waitrose, Planet Organic, and Fortnum and Mason, among others, in the UK. Working directly with thousands of smallholder farms in East Africa, Omega Pressery transforms surplus fruit and nuts into high-quality oils. Think ugly veg, building a transparent and more sustainable food supply chain along the way. Hopefully that was factually correct, Niki.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it any better.
Welcome, Niki, to BGS.
Thank you.
It's great to have you. First time, I think, on a podcast platform like this.
Yeah, exactly. Super excited. I've never really had the opportunity to talk about our journey or the business on any platform. So this is going to be exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it with you. So right off the bat, I'll say that you really kindly sent me your product, and I've been using your avocado oil actually for a while, and I'm really liking how it doesn't overpower the flavor of what I'm cooking, and I just kind of feel healthier eating it. So yeah, and I'm like proper Spanish, olive oil stan. So you've managed to convert me slightly to avocado oils. So tell me, your LinkedIn currently says that you are Chief Avocado Officer at Omega Pressery. Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, I didn't really overthink that back in the day, but it does have a deeper meaning to it. So we are a female-led brand, so I do run the company, but the reason I decided to not say CEO and say Chief Avocado Officer, because avocado is so critical to everything we do, from how we work with the farmers, the supply chain, the product itself, the byproducts of avocado oil. And so I just thought that associating my name and my title to avocado just makes sense. And it also, it's a great reminder for me what I'm focusing on, and allows me to kind of always remind myself that I have a bigger role than just a CEO. I have a role for the farmers on the ground, where farmer co-op heads are called chiefs. So I probably don't do as much as they do on the ground ever, but I think it's a good reminder and connection that I have to look at everything holistically from the start of the supply chain all the way to the end of it when the product's on shelf.
What would you say has been a really critical learning that you've had over the last year and a half running this company that actually when you founded it, you did not expect to learn?
Well, there's been many, many, many things. But I think the most important one was you can't do everything yourself. We are trying to solve a very complex problem here. It's not just bringing a nice, healthy cooking oil on the shelf. It's about connecting the dots from the origin, the farmers you work with, all the way through to your bottling partners here, through your branding team. And I think I used to have this tendency, more than my co-founder and husband, of wanting to dive into everything myself. And I realized I was the bottleneck across all these functions and processes because, I was so focused on doing it perfectly, and nothing is ever perfect in a startup. I think it's about speed to market, speed to reacting, trusting other people, trusting our team on the ground sometimes to source the right quality fruits, to be like working with the farmers correctly, I was so attached to that element of it because I'm a very emotional person. And when I go on farms, I'm like tearing off half the time, like listening to the stories. But I think building trust with the people you work with was extremely important for me. And I've learned to do that more. And I've just realized that you can't always have the perfect, outcome all the time in every situation. So just being kinder to ourselves, that we're iterating everything. It's not like a ultimate scenario with whatever we do.
That's actually such an important learning that many of us have as we kind of jump into our founder roles. And actually, I'm thinking back to the little conversation we were having just before we started recording, where you were talking about how you can be quite hard on yourself as well at times, working 6-7 hours at a stretch. So tell me about how, maybe it's not something that you've completely figured out yet, but in what ways would you like to be kinder to yourself as a founder as you are kind of, doing all this really important work, but also putting in all these hours that you're putting in?
I think I need to first accept, like most founders probably, that we are just human and we have X amount of hours every day on our plate, As founders, we have a tendency to keep adding to that plate without realizing that something has to go if you're going to bring something else in. So I think one of the things, kindness is not just forgiving yourself for not submitting something in a deadline or taking a break. I think it stems much deeper into how you organize your life. I need to be kinder to myself when I am designing my week's calendar.
Yeah.
I need to be conscious of myself, of the people who are now working with us. We just had our first hire, to be conscious of how much, her diary should be filled up, how much my diary should be filled up, and how much sometimes as a small startup you can achieve and find the right balance between ambition and being able to manage what you currently have, like properly. So I think learning that balance of like different activities within the business, balancing growth and existing channels that you have, just being a bit more conscious of that. I think that's being kind, is being more present, more aware of your time and prioritizing. So that's what I've started to do now. It's very early stage. It takes time, but that would be my ultimate goal by the end of this year, that, I've managed to give myself enough time to also reflect strategically for the business and also conduct my day-to-day operations.
It's almost like challenging that hustle culture mindset that was fed into us quite a few years ago, right? Very interesting that you talk about being kinder when you design your week and your months, because I'm actually reading a book called Design Your Life, and it talks about this whole thing of like how you can be more strategic about what you want to achieve in your life. And this is not just in your work or your business, it's like more holistic than that. But it's actually partly being smarter, but also being nicer to yourself and your future version of yourself as well, which we often forget about, that person. I used to always joke, like when I was working in my consulting role, I used to always joke that, that's a future Mitali problem. And I was like, she is going to hate me for saying that. And she really did. And I'm sure we can touch on that a bit more as the conversation progresses. But I really want to learn a bit more about you, because your business, a lot of the farms that you're working with all of them are based in East Africa. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Kenya. I'm a fourth generation Kenyan, and I was born in the UK, but then my parents, have always lived in Kenya. I did my high school there in Nairobi, and then I came for university to the UK, like probably every international student journey. But I think 60-70% of my life so far has been in Kenya. And I guess the last 20% of the last couple of years I've been in the UK. But that's shaped a lot of my thinking, and I'm so grateful to have had that opportunity to grow up in such an environment. It really, like, it's almost like, when you come here, you live in a very perfect world. You hear about the news in, like, South America and India and all those other, like, developing countries. But living in one, you also realize that, a lot of it sometimes is exaggerated. A lot of it is also incorrect in terms of, like, people are struggling a lot more sometimes, but there is also a lot of growth that is happening. They're peaceful countries, but then you realize the reality of how everyone is kind of trying to survive, everyone's in survival mode. And I think that shaped a lot of, like, who I am today, the decisions I've made today to start my own business as well, the culture I was in there. So yeah.
It's an interesting thing, actually. I was going to ask you as a follow-up, which was, from your observation of the last 20% of your life that you've lived in the UK, what differences have you noticed in the way that people have been living their lives in the UK, maybe most of their lives in the UK, versus you having lived most of your life, particularly as a Kenyan Indian? Do you notice any similarities and or differences that you'd like to call out?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I always think about it. So, like, something about Kenya, and I'm sure other developing countries, it's a very community network-driven society. In Kenya, if I were to start a business, in order for me to find a lawyer, find a manufacturer, find a supplier for anything, I need introductions, to be able to get into a supermarket. It's very introduction driven, very network driven, who how you navigate. In the UK, on the contrary, yes, networks are important, but a network doesn't guarantee you, like, a listing, or doesn't guarantee you, like, the relationship is done. You're going to definitely be working with this person. Here, it's a free market. It's an open market, which I really value. I thought that was really nice, because in Kenya, for me to start something, I needed some very influential people to back me, to make introductions, and, I needed to be known like that. Whereas here, I can be a nobody, not have any networks, which I didn't when I came to the UK. And just find my way, like, I can go in a Google search and find, like, a merchandising company, it's that easy. In Kenya, you can't Google things. You can, there is internet, and all of that is there, but you most likely won't find the best supplier. And here there's a lot more choice. So what it meant, it meant it was actually easier for us to start a small business in the UK than it is sometimes in Kenya, where, it takes a lot longer to unlock different channels, unlock relationships. Here, you can just, with the basic information you have, you can sort of, like, start any business you'd like, small scale, doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to have so much capital behind it. And that was a big difference for me. And that's why it was even more difficult at the beginning, because growing up in Kenya, I was very used to somebody making an introduction. Oh, she wants to go to this school. Why don't you meet the headmaster of the school? Like, almost still, like, it was very introduction based. And here, I wanted to get a listing in Planet Organic or Vaughan & Mason, and there was no direct route. Like, you have to go, you have to pitch, you have to apply to competitions. I was never exposed to the whole idea of going on stage, pitching, going to multiple competitions, trying to win a listing, so different mindset, definitely. And I'd also say people were a lot more open-minded to innovation and ideas here in this part of the world than people would be in Kenya. But having said that, I find that people, and growing up as well, And I'll explain why as well. In Kenya, being an entrepreneur is encouraged more purely because the work-life balance in Kenya, like there's a Monday to Saturday work week and you don't get paid that much for the time you put in, and everyone's hustling. And if you get an opportunity to start a business, that is probably your way out from breaking out from your current financial status and making it big. Whereas in the UK, the mindset, despite like more acceptance of innovation, it was more of like, when I was in uni at least, it was like, I'm getting a degree to apply to all the big corporate jobs. And, entrepreneurship as a module was there, but there's not many students, spending their free time like thinking of ideas. So, professors are more like, yeah, you need a good grade for your job. And I was kind of primed here in uni. I kind of lost that entrepreneur side after 3 years of uni here. And I was like, I'm going to try and apply to all the big four, go to like McKinsey, become partner. But in reality, I kind of forgot that other side, which was like, I always dreamt of running my own business, watching my own father do that when I was young. And I almost forgot about that. Here, everyone's very systematic and pushing you in one direction of being in a high position job. And because it can be well paid and you can be successful. So yeah, I think those were the realities between the two cultures, the two countries that I had to kind of adjust myself to.
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with so much. Like, I literally was speaking to someone last night who also comes from an entrepreneur family, and so do I, and I think so do you. When you kind of go through the university system in the UK, you definitely do get kind of put this messaging on you, which is, this is what you need to aspire to. And not only that, but then when everyone around you also seems to be aspiring towards that, and there seems to be an element of like glorification of it as well, which, I mean, like you said, rightly so, it's a really good life to have, and it's one that can give you so much stability and fulfillment. But I think for those of us who haven't, in our formative years when our brains were being developed, necessarily seen that around us, and what we've seen is our parents, like, working in a very different way, let's say.
Yeah.
It can be very confusing and you can lose part of yourself. So yeah, hard relate to a lot of what you're saying. And it's super interesting to hear about like the difference in growing up in like, what would be a developing country versus more established systems here, where it's like there's a protocol, you just follow that, and you will be fine. If you deviate against that, most people will call you very brave, right? Exactly. And it probably is. It's a bit naive too, but I think there's a real strength, I think, in having both worlds. Because, I mean, tell me more about how that experience, having done the 3 years in uni, having worked in corporate, and now being a founder, like, how does that mindset of like that kind of what we've just spoken about, of the structure and the way things are meant to be done, how do you actually apply that as a strength now as a founder?
Yeah, I mean, and before I answer that, just back on your other point, like, you're so right as well in terms of like your family kind of almost confusing you on the path you should take. Because, I had an interesting one when I first got my first job and I told my parents about it, then they were like, yay, well done, And I remember when I told them I'm quitting my corporate job, this was about just above a year and a half ago, and I'm going now like full time, like in January this year, I was like, I'm going full time into Omega Pressery. I had the most underwhelming reaction, not because they were like, no, that's a bad thing. Like, I think they were like, but why? Like, you're there. And I'm like, may I remind you, like, you've done the same thing. But like, I think, it's very interesting. And coming back to your question, that how the last couple of years, from university here, then going through a structured system, and how I'm kind of now applying that into the unstructured Omega Pressery. I think before I think my mind started working in boundaries. When you're in in a very structured, systematic process, you almost start to lose your ability to push boundaries sometimes. And I felt myself losing my creative side as well to things, because there was a process, there was a structure, there wasn't anything to really disrupt, I started seeing myself like working within the parameters of like the 9 to 5, and then not really doing anything much with my life beyond 5 o'clock, So all that structure almost became like, it was fine. I was having a work-life balance, and I was also growing really well in my career. But I think all of it seemed so like it was like written for me, and it was so perfect, and I was just in a matrix, just clocking in, clocking out, and doing my thing, and waiting for the next promotion. And I think there was a buildup of like this energy in me where I was like, you know what, this I'm not getting stimulated. And when I started now Omega Pressery, and it's like chaos, there is no structure. I have to define that structure. I feel a lot more. First of all, I have learned to be in a structured environment, so it's easier to apply that now in my company. But at the same time, I have that balance and freedom of pushing boundaries when they need to be pushed, like growing, at the pace I'd like to grow. I feel a lot more in control of it. That can be dangerous, because now there is no one really telling you when to stop and when to also like sometimes pick up your socks, and get moving. So, you're kind of managing the tempo. You have to be a lot more realistic with everything. You're also the last man, like, in the business, where there's no one behind you if something goes wrong, if a presentation isn't delivered, if a deadline's missed, that somebody's going to recover the situation. So I think it's helped me now. The chaos, the unstructuredness is something I've learned to now live in, and find pockets of productivity, pockets of like creativity, pockets of like, just like the boring admin stuff, and design my business and design my life around that, and bring structured in a very unstructured way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it works. I think it allows me to be a bit more disruptive.
And it's always iterative, right? Like,
yeah,
it's so easy to catastrophize and think, oh, like I'm now in this completely different type of career. I need to be living very differently. What I've realized actually is there's so many good things that I picked up from working in corporate, which I still apply. Like, it's so funny because now I think like the type of work that I'm doing, I can be doing from a coffee shop. Usually I need a strong internet connection. So as long as I have that, I'm good. But I find myself going to like co-working spaces that look a lot like my old office. Yeah. And I'm like, I could be anywhere in the world, but why am I in this glass building in like the city of London? Like, why have I chosen to do this? But it's because I quite like the feeling of being productive in spaces like that, because that's what I know to do.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And actually even like thinking about the 9 to 5 structure. So interestingly, my fitness tracker ring told me that I'm more of an early evening person.
Yeah.
Which explains so much, because when you have 9 a.m. meetings and you're just like, why am I so not okay? And you're like, it's because it's not actually how my brain works or my body.
Yeah.
And so I'll try and stick to like some form of 9 to 5 or like a 10 to 6. But then usually a lot of the deep thinking work happens around like 1 p.m. onwards.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, why didn't I have the time and space to do it that way before? Because I guess we weren't able to, right? But
that's still better. Like my deep thinking starts at like 11 p.m. and that is when my team is like getting messages, like at like 12 a.m. and like 1 a.m. and I'm putting a disclaimer. Please don't reply until like
I don't expect you to be there.
Yeah, I'm like, but I don't know why. All the creative ideas, I guess, are in my like very relaxed state when I'm just like sitting in bed, like, and getting all my ideas, like once everything from the day is just now, turned off. But yeah, I think you're right. I think one thing my corporate life did like teach me and all that structure is I'm very particular about like hitting deadlines, hitting milestones, because I was always that personality, surprisingly, that actually thrived in the corporate environment where, I was always going for the next promotion, ticking all the boxes. And I knew like, what were the steps I needed to take to get there. And a lot of that helps here because, in the world of Omega Pressery now, you're selling our product to a lot of retailers, right? And you don't often, it's not one conversation and they're like, right, you've got the listing. Even with Waitrose, we started that conversation almost like a year ago before we got listed. And it was a series of steps, structured steps that, you take to keeping the buyer in the loop, to persevere through, to keep making sure you're in their orbit. And then, knowing when to accelerate those conversations, decelerate, take a step back. So I think the world of consulting, the corporate world, did teach me like how to take those steps, which I apply today, and also like how to work under high pressure situations, which is, almost every other day in your business. So like,
So true.
yeah. So I think there's so many positives out of it. And I guess it was just now trying to like implement a lot of like the learnings. It's never like a standard map, like I'm just going to apply what I learned here. But I think it's taking the good stuff, trying to embed that in your culture, especially now that we're growing as a team. It's become more important. It's not just me and my co-founder over dinner discussing, anything we discuss has to be passed on to the team. So doing it at normal hours is very important.
So you talk about this pitching process. So taking Waitrose as an example, I'm really curious as to what those steps actually were. I mean, without like really, we could be here for hours probably talking about it, but like maybe if you could touch on like the key things that you had to do and what milestones you needed to hit and what moments you experienced where you were like, oh my God, this is really happening. Or, oh my God, I'm really out of my depth.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Nihar and I are very ambitious characters, we sort of approached Waitrose like 9 months into the business, and we only had 2 product SKUs. Now we have 6. So we didn't have a nice range and portfolio to even provide to them. We were quite young. We didn't have the best pricing because we were so small. We didn't have the efficiencies. But I think, there's a saying like luck favors the bold, and we approached them, and it just happened to be a time when they were sort of looking for brands to pitch in the incubator. And again, goes back to that whole being comfortable with the pitching situation. So, we agreed without really thinking about how we're going to fulfill the order if it happened. I think we went in with the idea that it's going to be a great learning experience and not that we're going to get the listing. I think we wanted feedback on whether we were ready for mainstream retail. But I think, we ended up pitching really well. There was an opportunity in the market because of all the anti-seed oil trends that are happening and people looking for healthier cooking oils. So it was a bit of luck mixed with good timing. And then there were a series of like, our buyer wasn't even present in that pitch. So that often happens, you turn up, you work so hard, you create an amazing presentation. And sometimes it was all for like, they were like, great, but we're not the decision makers, so you have to be comfortable with that idea. And I was like, oh my God, I just spent 1 hour doing this, and it wasn't even the person who was meant to hear this. But I think it's about being patient. What we did is persistently, constantly emailing them. Then the buyer one day just responded. Usually in the world of retail, you will not get responses, and not because they're ghosting you. They're aware of you, but they'll only just contact you when they're very interested. So it can be really frustrating. You feel like you're talking to yourself. But I guess, if you're okay to do that, we got a response after like 3 months of just emailing them constantly, and she said, why don't you come into our office? And, I had sent her long emails and that was the only response. And she was like, why don't you pitch the product, the whole thing to me again? So this time we went back, we kind of had more deeper pitch with her, like sample the products. And it's easier to win over hearts when you're there in person. And again, that was a very good opportunity for us to show who we are as founders, show that authenticity. And then after that, we had, I would say, 5 months of silence, like pin drop silence. And this is when you start questioning, like, are we good enough? Are we not good enough? You know, you're sending emails and emails, like, any feedback, these are the commercials. You start doubting. But I think one thing you have to realize that good things take time to come. And I think that's been a great learning for us. We didn't think we'd ever get a response. But I think if you're, that's our inner demon sometimes telling us like, oh, it's done, you know, and we get lazy and we give up. So I'm really glad we kept on communicating. And even though we didn't get a response, and then we're now like 8 months in, and since we did the first pitch, and we get an email from the buyer saying, I'm actually reviewing the range and we are going to consider you, but there's no guarantee. And we'll let you know by like end of July, you know, 2025, whether you're in or not. Now we're in September and we still haven't heard back. And that's usually, people don't tell you if you've not made it, you know, and we're like, oh, we didn't make it. And anyways, we were like, maybe we're not ready, you know. And then September comes in and we get an email saying, congratulations. So it was like, you know, periods of just blank moments of not knowing what's happening, not hearing back. You're almost like, that's it, we're not getting in. And we get this email. And I think for a second, I had to reread that email like a couple of times. I'm like, is this an official email? Is someone pranking me? Like,
Is this phishing?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and it was it's one of those anticlimax moments, you know, where you're going about your normal day and you get this email, and it's a very genuine celebration moment, but it was like short-lived. It was like for like 5 minutes, you know, me and my co-founder like jumping in the living area, like yes, we did it, and can't believe it. We don't know how it's happened, but it's happened. And then we were like, shit, we've been given 2 months to go on shelves. You know, we got the email on September, and then in November they told us, you know, we were expecting 100 stores, 150 stores. They were like, you're going into 50 stores. And that was bad timing, because that's when the avocado harvest season just ends. And, you know, the oil pressing has reduced. There's no more oil practically in the market. And we hadn't accounted for this. And they picked the 2 products that were our flagship products. And we had 2 choices, you know, either to tell them we can't do this because we don't have enough supply, or just somehow figure it out. And, you know, often people think like, yeah, you got into retail, that's big. But I think there's a huge pressure financially, like especially when you're a startup. And we realized that, you know, now we're careful how we're growing, because that was great, but we didn't have a team. We hadn't raised then. So we quickly had to go for an investment round. And we were really lucky at that time as well. Had a couple of people believe in us, and everything else is history. But like, we did scramble. It took 3 months of us scrambling, and never again would I want to do it that way if I could. Obviously, you never say no to opportunity, but I think you now need to be mindful that, you know, we were just a 2-man ship. Nihir was still doing his job part-time. I had just gone full-time, and we didn't have the bandwidth, we didn't have the capital, we didn't have inventory. So, you know, and luckily we managed to get it all sorted out. But that's the nature of startups, you know, and you just got to be positive and then be ready for it.
Are you glad that you did it when you did, in hindsight?
Absolutely. I think timing is everything. I believe in timing. Yes. Were we early? Yes. You know, I think a lot of people tell us that was ridiculous of you guys. Like, you didn't even have money to then spend on marketing and any of it. But I think it was the right time for the product, because, you know, when trends are happening, and this is what I say, what I said earlier, speed is everything. You know, when you kind of miss the boat, not that it won't come again, it will, but there is a long period of time. It takes time, you know. I wish actually I had had conversations with some of the other retailers. I wish we believed in ourselves a little bit more had we started those conversations earlier. You know, those relationships start building at that time, you know, but we were so nervous, and the fact that we went for Waitrose was great. But I'm glad we did that, and that actually forced us to change from being a lifestyle business, which is how we were kind of treating it, because it was a side hustle first, and now it's more of a lifestyle thing, to now actually becoming a very serious mainstream business, and thinking a bit bigger, you know, like having a big picture in the mind where, you know, if we can do good for these small communities in London, why can't we do something bigger and better for the entire nation? You know, like why can't we? It forced us to go back to our supply chain, get good pricing, you know, like it helped us just become efficient. You know, we started looking at all the blocks. It actually also supported our smallholder farmers. Like since joining Waitrose, we have now 400 more like smallholder farmers who've joined our network. And it just brought efficiencies throughout, and it's benefited everyone across the value chain. We rescued more avocados naturally because we needed more oil. So I think I'm glad we did it, and it's now forced us to pivot in terms of our growth trajectory in the business.
Talk to me a bit more about that jump from thinking of it as being a lifestyle business to now being what you called it, a like serious, like mainstream business.
Yeah.
Would you say that you were almost forced into thinking about it that way because you had stocked in such a big retailer? So it was almost like being a victim of your own success? Or was it something that you'd always kind of, either you or your co-founder Nihir had always kind of kept in mind that, oh, maybe this is going to be bigger than what we think it is? Yeah.
I mean, when we started the brand and this product, it was a side hustle. We were testing whether it would work in the market. We had very little. We used our own savings. We were bootstrapping up till we got Waitrose. We've always had the ambitions, and Nia and I have always known that we want to start something of our own in the food space. And I have this really weird dream that I've always had since a very young age, is one day I'm going to see a product on the shelf, and I've always had this dream that I'm going to watch somebody pick it up from a Waitrose shelf, or like from any supermarket shelf, and put in their basket. And for me, that was like success, and I'm ready to retire. Like, you know, I was like, one day that will happen in a space I really care about. So I did know that my goal has always been big. I guess it was the timing of it. So we were forced, definitely, we were a victim of our success in the sense that it happened sooner than we had planned. You know, we had a game plan. We were gonna, you know, start having conversations later and be a bit more sustainable. You know, we kind of had a bit of a 0 to 100, you know, success in such a short time. And that's the reason we took on so much stress as well. As founders, you know, at one point, it actually it became a reason why I burned out, and I became a bit demotivated because I was like, oh my God, this is like too much pressure. And the stakes are higher now. You know, there is investor money at hand, all of that. But we've always wanted to become a global household brand in something healthy that also then has like the whole artisanal element to it, the craftsmanship attached to it, the sustainability bit. It's easier said than done because as you scale, you have to be a bit more commercial. But I think now it's an interesting period for us because we are now on that journey. You know, we're getting constant pressure from the market where it's a new product. People, unlike olive oil, don't want to pay the same price for it. We can't be more expensive than olive oil, premium olive oil, even though avocado is a more expensive crop. So, you know, we've had to figure all of that out whilst balancing like the ethical bit of what the foundations of the business truly stood for, which is paying our farmers well, you know, just paying the right price for the crops, making sure we don't adulterate, do the blending stuff, which this category is known to do to bring cheap products to the on shelf. So yeah, it's been a huge turning point for us, a huge, it's a point now we need to take a break and reflect how we manage the process here on. But yeah, it's been crazy.
Roller coaster ride, hey? And
Yeah.
like a good time for you to kind of take a step back, even like through doing this right now, like being able to think back and be like, wow, we really did do that. And also because having thrown yourself into the deep end, sometimes I do find like the best learning comes that way, because then the next time you do something of that sort, you're going to be so much more, maybe even like mature about the way you think about it.
Yeah.
Because you'll have all this experience and like learning from before. If you had not done it when you did, then it might have actually taken you a lot longer if you weren't as bold when you did it and naive. Sometimes naivety is a real strength.
Yeah.
And sometimes I find like maybe listening to too many podcasts about businesses like takes away the naivety, because you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds stressful. I don't want to do that.
I know, exactly. I always believe like oblivion is bliss. Like when you don't know what's ahead and what's going to come, you are actually a bit more, you're fearless. It's like almost like a baby, you know, they don't know that, you know, they're going to get hurt if they do a certain activity, but they do it and then they learn, fine, they get hurt, but it makes them stronger and braver.
Yeah.
And I think I would not have it any other way. You know, it kind of pushed us. We were on the edge of like that swimming pool, like, should we jump? Should we not jump? Should we jump? You know, we were sitting on the fence and the entire time. And sometimes you just need the universe to just push you into the deep end and say, swim, you know, and when you do that, you learn so much about yourself, you know, your survival mode, like your instincts, they kick in. You know, you have no choice but to be confident about the decisions you make, the decisions we were always like scared to make. You just have to be brave and courageous, you know. So it was a good learning for us, and it has made me more courageous as a person. Now I am trying to punch higher than than I can achieve today, but I know that if I don't try, sometimes you can just end up being on stagnant for too long, you know. So sometimes just don't overthink it. Don't listen to too many people and just dive in, you know, listen to your gut.
Kind of pivoting the conversation a little bit completely into a different direction. I actually only started cooking with avocado oil very recently. When I was telling you, I've tried Omega Pressery now. What kind of dishes are you loving to cook with these oils? So both macadamia and avocado.
It's a very interesting question. Those are the only oil bottles I have in my house right now, so I'm trying to get through them.
You're loyal to the brand. We don't use olive oil.
Having said that, I really do love olive oil. I think, you know, it's nice. But obviously, because it's our product, you know, you experiment a lot. And I've been using it to cook my usual Indian dishes that I have, South Asian dishes. I use it to cook all sorts of things, right? Like even Italian food. You know, I know a lot of people are going to hate me saying that right now, but especially the olive oil fans. But generally, it's so underrated because it is the perfect oil for any high heat cooking because of its natural high smoke point. And olive oil is great, but, you know, you drizzling with it and appreciating the flavor, you know, finishing the pasta dish with olive oil would taste great. But when you're cooking, you know, I always try and prioritize the avocado oil and even the macadamia oil because it has an even higher smoke point. You know, not many people talk about it because people are less aware about it, but it's got even better health benefits than avocado oil. It's got the highest amount of good fats amongst any nut and seed oils. And avocados next, and then obviously you have your olive oil. But the beauty is like they pair really well with so many dishes, whether you're vegetarian, whether you're meat, and it's because of the high smoke point, you actually retain the good nutritional benefits. So I've cooked pasta dishes. I use it in my smoothies as well. It's like, you know, when people have a shot of olive oil because of the polyphenols, you could use the avocado oil in the same way, the cold pressed extra virgin one. So, and same with the macadamia. So I've been very creative like that with the dishes. Yeah.
I used it to make a like Chinese inspired stir fry, and it actually worked pretty well. Yeah. And then like similarly to what you said, because often I would use sesame oil, not for cooking, but drizzling for the flavor. And why not use a bit of both as long as you're like regulating the portion sizes, I guess.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the actual farms. You touched on the fact that sometimes when you visit these farms, you get emotional hearing the stories. What have you learned about avocado and macadamia farming going out to all of these farm partners that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Like, it's almost like a brain dump, when you go out there. Sometimes we're so disconnected, living here, especially over the last like 10 years. I felt more disconnected to the origins of food and the people who grow the food, I sometimes you go to a holiday in Italy, you go to like the vineyards and stuff, and you get to experience that. In Africa, it's very different. You have to consciously, there's no retreats around vineyards and like coffee tasting when there's such a big crop in Kenya. You kind of have to go out there. And I make it a point every year to spend, it's like 2 to 3 months when I'm in Kenya. I like go a couple of times and visit as many of the partners. And what you realize is what you think you know about them and their struggles is false, because I always thought like they wanted the highest price for the fruit, but what you realize, like, they're human beings like us. They have bills to pay, they have children to send to school fees to pay, they have medical bills they need to pay, they don't have insurance. So the biggest issue they have is cash flow, and that's a big problem amongst all smallholder farmers. They are growing the fruit, but they only get paid like 4 or 5 months once they harvest the fruit. So that becomes very challenging for them to survive during those periods when, the crop is growing. So one thing I realized is the struggle. How can we reduce the friction, the pain points during these months? How can we build loyalty? How can we build trust? A lot of the times people approach them so transactional and say, I'll give you the highest price for this fruit, so sell it to me. And they will. But what we decided to do things differently. You hear like how much they're sort of struggling, how they actually want to improve their farming techniques, but they don't have money for that. So what we try to do, obviously it's very hard when you're a smaller business, but as we grow, it's getting a lot more easier to support them, is building these trust-based contracts, giving them as much as we can cash flow slightly earlier, like paying them maybe 50% of the value of the crops earlier, and then eventually that kind of sorts out their problems. And even if somebody comes later on in the season and offers them a higher price to the fruit, they may not feel inclined to give it to them because they feel so loyal to you. They know you were there for them during that time. So they're just humans like us. Today, when somebody does something good for you, you're always going to remember and say, I owe you one, and it is the same mindset they have. I think people just feel like there's a communication barrier, or they don't have time to take out from their precious, like, operations day or whatever it is to go and just speak to them. But when you speak to them, you learn a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think, that was the emotional part for me, is often we're so lucky to, we complain about, oh, I didn't get this listing, oh, I didn't get that. Whereas they're surviving, and I think that makes me so emotional. And that those are the stakes that are high for me. Like, for me, preserving a listing in Waitrose, for me, getting more listings is even more crucial now, because I know how much it means to them and building their future of their generations that are going to come through, So yeah, I think that's the emotional part. And I'm a very emotional person. So when I hear these things, I'm like, I'm going to go do everything, go to the ends of the world to make this possible. But
here's my soul on a plate.
Yeah. So it's a humbling process for me as a person as well. And realizing that, all these materials that, we seek sometimes, like, sure, you have to be ambitious and it's fine to have them. There's nothing wrong. But at the same time, sometimes, let's be grateful of what we have and let's support each other. as much as we can, which companies often don't do. And then it defeats the purpose. It's an unsustainable business at the end of the day if you don't support the people or the backbone of it.
And I think that's probably the Kenyan in you speaking, right? The
Yeah.
whole thing you were saying at the beginning around growing up around community and people helping one another without really keeping tabs or, doing the whole maths of like, I did this for you, now you do this for me.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, you're right, it's people that we're working with. And often I think when we're working behind a screen, which most of us do most of the day, it can be so easy to forget that.
Yeah.
Like whether you're even thinking of your customers or the people you're reaching through your campaigns or your ads, or, the farmers you're working with and what their day-to-day lives are like. And they're people with emotions as well and responsibilities. So it's a really good thing that you're working and dedicating your time to work towards something that kind of covers all those bases. You're helping yourself, you're helping farmers, trying to pay them properly, trying to get good prices, but also trying to create credibility with the brand so more people find out about it on shelves and, going into these stores. So I think it's a really such a great thing to dedicate yourself to do. Can't be easy at all from what we're hearing, but it sure seems like it's worth it. And I think it's also the whole, I don't know if it's us being women and emotional, really loving a story, really feeling someone's story and being like, yes, I will do everything to help you. But also being desi, no. Those are the values we've grown up with. Would you agree that so much of that, the mix of cultures and the different places you've grown up has led you to now, put all of these values back into your business?
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on a very strong point, being desi, being coming from, in a household where your mom is always, or your dad is always trying to think for the best situation for you. They're really, they want you to be strong and independent, but they also really want to hold your hand and, they want to guide you, and I'm so fortunate that I've been able to kind of experience that, there's always that selflessness, unconditional love that is coming one way, and that really does form the business personality that I am today, because I'm not going to say I'm a mom in the business, but I think of all my stakeholders, whether it's the new marketing person that's come in, whether it's the farmers, whether it's our social media team, whoever it is, I always have this instinct where I want them to succeed as well. I want them to, I'm more giving, if I'm going to win, I want to share the wins. So definitely, I think, all the different cultures that I've managed to grow up with, being in an Indian household first, being in an African culture as well, which is very similar to an Indian household, to be honest. The values definitely translate into the actions we take today as a business, trying to do things very fairly as well, not exploiting anybody. And then you also realize when you come here, right, the culture here in the UK taught me to be also a lot more open-minded, which sometimes was a con in being in a, Indian household, that you creativity was welcomed and being open-minded, but not so much, they're within your boundaries. So I think it allowed me to be a lot more open-minded and approach things a bit differently as well. So getting the best of different cultures, the diversity has definitely helped inform the way we make strategic business decisions, and hopefully it will continue to as we want to expand into new markets. And today our product is not focused for a certain ethnic group. It's focused towards South Asians, British people, the African people, a mix of people, and we have to know how to market ourselves to them, to brand ourselves to them, and communicate to all of them. So it definitely helps.
And I imagine you'll keep learning and picking up bits and pieces from different cultures as you start expanding into other countries and continents, which is super exciting. Something that's been sort of playing on my mind this entire conversation is, what is it like working with your husband?
I know. I get asked that a lot. You know what? It's amazing. I'm not going to lie, actually. I wouldn't have it any other way, because if today we were doing different things in life, and he was we had different, like, he was in a different job and I was running the startup, or vice versa, I think it would be very hard for us to understand the certain sacrifices that we make, that now we're both in the same boat and making them together, like a great example, like, we're kind of deprioritized our honeymoon right now. But had it been like one of us was not doing the business and one of us was, and that could be like a conflict, sometimes late nights working through certain hours, and it would be very hard for us to understand each other and live with peace, to be really honest. Having said that, it is tough because we're both really strong personalities. We don't get in each other's way because he manages operations, finance, and I'm more like sales and marketing and branding. But there is crossover around business development, strategic direction. At the end of the day, we're all wearing the same hats and changing them over. But I think it's about learning how to preserve your personal relationship, which we are now learning to do. I'm not going to lie, the first year, I think the business almost defined our relationship, which was not healthy and very toxic, because I was like, are we only together because we're doing this business? Because that's what we talk about. I think you have to be so conscious and so intentional that, when we're going on a date, we're not going to talk about work, and we're actually going to talk about, let's get all the pressing topics out of the way, business topics. And then now on, we're just going to talk about like anything relaxed, or not speak at all, So I think it's definitely made us, it's grown us in our relationship. Like we're definitely thinking about, we're more mindful of each other's space and time as well. It's not like, there were times I would wake up in the morning and I'd be like, the first thing I tell him instead of good morning is, have you sent that email, by the way? I had a dream about it, right? And it was bad. And he would do the same thing to me, like on another day. And I was like, look, we have to be mindful for each other's space. We have to prioritize our personal life and decisions as well, like going on holidays, going on a honeymoon, doing all these things. We can be understanding because we're in the same boat, but let's just be more mindful. So I think it's been a journey. I'm not going to say it's been rosy and easy. We have arguments, we have conflicts, and sometimes after having that conflict, it's not like we're going home and going to our own husbands and wives and separate from each other, and you can just go and whine about, your co-founder to your to another person. You're together and you're going to sleep in the same bed, and you're going to have to say goodnight to each other after a very strong debate about the business direction. So I think, letting go, practicing some of the simple principles of being kind to each other, being more forgiving to each other, being more mindful. So we've learned a lot of things, and I feel like had this business not happened and challenged us in ways, both personal and in the business, we'd never grow in our relationship as well. And now we found a great balance. It's taken time, but it's very exciting. We're so aligned in life. We respect that we're two very different people. He's a morning person, I'm an evening person, and we are getting comfortable with that idea. So that's why I'm saying I think it's amazing. It's chaotic, it's exciting, but if it was too perfect, I think that would be an issue as well, So I quite like the masala that comes with it.
Well, also because when things look a bit too perfect, there usually is something underlying.
Yeah.
Because we're humans. We are definitely messy creatures.
No, exactly.
What are you currently very excited about for the brand and for yourself personally?
That's a good question. Well, I think the most important thing is where the brand could go. Up until now, and until this Waitrose listing happened, obviously there was Fortnum's and then Waitrose, and all of a sudden it became real that we can go mainstream, and we can achieve efficiencies to make this product more accessible from a price point. So I think what I'm really excited about is the growth into like mainstream retail, getting our products in the hands of many more people. That does good for the health. I'm excited about the opportunity to expand into new markets as well. I think what we've realized is we're thinking bigger now. People have been reaching out to us from different continents, different countries, and inquiring, and that was something we didn't realize, that there was a potential market or demand on those sides. So I think I'm quite excited about how big it can grow. I'm nervous as well because I'm not sure if we're like mentally ready. If this is a few listings in itself is already tough, but I think it's an exciting path to go onto, and building a team, because I never thought I'd have a team. I'd never thought I've managed teams before, yes, but like having your own team, leading a team, there's a big difference, So I'm really excited about growing the team. It's been a very isolating journey, like just going alone through and through since last year. So having people to actually bounce ideas off, have a culture. So, and I missed that from the corporate life. So I think having those elements where it's becoming real, we just moved into a new office space. So just these few tangible things is something I'm super excited about. And then from a personal perspective, I think I'm excited to explore new markets, I've always been nervous. I'm a very structured person. Like I love like the UK and Kenya, and I was like, I don't want to ever go beyond that. He's done his university in America before and stuff. So he's a lot more open-minded. So I think challenging myself to go into these new markets, accepting different, going into deeper ends of the seas, is something I'm quite excited about. I think it'll be a good change for me, and a good growth point as well. Sharing our story about the brand as well. Like obviously I'm here today on this podcast. I think, I'll get the opportunity to empower and inspire so many other female founders who come from actually Africa, but, always have this imposter syndrome that, or inferior complexity that they can't make a big brand in the West. So I think I'm quite excited for that from a personal perspective. If I can, encourage more and more the female founders from different diverse backgrounds to take the step and take a plunge. So yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening with the business as well. Some exciting PR coming up later this year. So just kind of working structurally towards it.
Yeah. And I love your product, and I really hope more people get to try it because it is a healthier alternative. And I am so intrigued about the macadamia oil now being healthier than even avocado oil, because I'm definitely going to give it a try. I think you guys are honestly killing it. And because I relate so much to the kind of work you were doing before you started this company, having been in very similar environments myself. Really, really excited for everything that's to come, stocking in new stores, working across the globe, and just giving more and more people access to these amazing products that are made by farmers in Kenya. And hopefully, through all of that, getting to support them and just, keeping the supply chain transparent, which I think is such a big thing. I don't think we touched on it too much, but yeah, I'm sure people can kind of go onto your website and read more about how the supply chain actually works, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's something I probably should have mentioned at the start, but the way we see Omega Pressery, it's more than just a brand. It's not just an oil. So our true philosophy as a company is to reimagine our food supply chain. So we're built on a supply chain first. And the reason we wanted to do that is because it's a commodity today, avocados. And the minute, you have bad quality fruit, you have farmers are not farming the produce in the right way. You lose the harvest for the following season. So it was so important for us to prioritize the supply chain and make it traceable, which is what I've struggled with as a consumer in this market, is a bit of traceability to origin of food. And also then, like, there's some amazing products I see for like a couple of months on shelves and then they're not there. And you wonder, like, where did that go?
Yeah.
So traceability and sustainability, that works for both, like your upstream supply chain, the farmers, the pressery, and also then works for consumers, because now consumers are developing a habit. I go to Sainsbury, I go to Waitrose, and they're my core products. Like, oils is a pantry staple. So every month I will buy 1 or 2 different oils. I will buy my milk, my bread. All of a sudden, when that brand disappears from the shelf, you're like, wait, what happened? And now where can I find it? And then that switch is so hard. So I think for us, we wanted to get the supply chain really right. We wanted to offer transparency to consumers of what's in the bottle, because this category is tainted with a lot of adulteration. And we wanted to also provide that traceability at a batch level to where is your crop coming from? When was it pressed? The same way you find it in coffee. Why can't you do it here? You can. It's just nobody has made the effort to kind of connect that supply chain, all the way from the common saying farm to fork. But we truly want to establish that. So yeah, on our website, you could definitely read a little bit more about it. But, soon we're going to be developing also some exciting technology around it where people can trace it back to, you'll know which region it came from, when it was pressed, and give consumers that visibility. At the moment, that visibility is more internal for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to build here, is a traceable and authentic, like, food brand, essentially.
Power to you, and very excited to see how it progresses. One question I leave all my guests with, which I'll leave you with as well, is what do you, Niki, have strong game in?
Oh, that's a good question. I think personally, I have a strong game in persuading and convincing people, because I think that's been my strength from a long time. I don't give up, and I keep, like, persisting and persuading people to ultimately get the outcome I want. And I think it's such an underrated thing. People are like, it's not good to be stubborn. It's good. No, I actually disagree. I think as a founder, or if you want to definitely make it in life in whatever path you are, the most important trait is to be able to persuade people, to convince people, to sway them, whether it's to start cooking with our oil, or whether it's to tell the farmer, sell me this and, at this price, whether it's to persuade retailers, challenge them. Every day you're persuading someone and the other. And I think for me, that is like being my strongest strength, is being able to convince, persuade, and do it persistently. And you need to be stubborn. You need to go after what you want. So yeah, I think that has been my personal strong game.
I love it. Also because you mentioned having imposter syndrome, and having that paired with this trait of being persuasive is such an interesting, almost like chalk and cheese. Like, how do you have both? But it's almost like the persuasiveness kind of will eventually get you to points where you will no longer feel impostery.
Exactly.
In spaces.
Exactly. And you got to go for it, right? Like, it's something I've learned over the last, believe it or not, I may be like a more extroverted character and, like, more social than Nihar. Nihar is more introverted. But I am very shy. I'm very nervous. I'm very fearful. I used to be scared of, like, rejection. I always wanted to hear a yes. And, the journey humbles you a little bit. You realize you're going to get so many no's, but a no today does not mean a no tomorrow. So like being persuasive is something now, like, just kind of going in, not caring what people think of you too much, and convincing, putting your point out there. You have nothing to lose. My mom always said the one thing: what are you scared of? What have you got to lose? What is the worst thing that can happen? Somebody will just say no. And if that no doesn't mean it's permanent, you always have to time yourself. You always have to keep trying. And if it still doesn't open, it was never meant to be. So you need to then recognize that and move to the next thing. So I think, honing that capability, honing that art, has, over the last year and a half, has definitely helped us unlock a lot of things.
Thank you so much, Niki, for coming on VGS. It was lovely chatting with you today.
Thank you for having us and having me, and talking about Omega Pressery. So appreciate
Excited
it.
to see more. Thank you.
Thank you.